Welcome to the Accounting Arc Podcast, where analysis, reaction, and comedy collide to tackle the big topics from the world of accounting and beyond. Join our trio of transformation agents as they discuss the hottest topics in and out of the profession, from breaking down industry trends, to reacting to everyday events, to uncovering the hidden humor in numbers. With wisdom, insight, and a dash of levity, they're proving that accounting isn't just about the numbers. It's about life. Because after all, accounting is in everything. The Accounting Arc Podcast starts now.
Welcome back to another episode of ARC. Today we're going to be talking about healthy boundaries. What is a boundary versus what is just not doing your job? So let's jump in, guys. How would you define a boundary? Well, Webster's dictionary
says... It's a line I'm not going to cross.
Or not let you cross, one or the other.
Yeah, so when you're thinking about healthy boundaries at work, what are the things that you think about?
I at work, I think one of them is time boundaries are an easy one as far as, expectations of when it's okay to call others for work-related things or for those other people to call you for work-related items.
I think that's a good one. I mean, from my own personal experience, right? I pick up my kid at 3:00. I understand that 3:00 is still the workday, right? And if people are expecting me to jump on a call, they know I'm going to have a kid in the background. He might be sitting at the kitchen table doing homework with me while I'm finishing up my workday. I'm not scheduling calls from 3 to 5 on the weeks that I have him because I focus so heavily on him. And people respect that boundary because I make sure I'm available the rest of the day, right? It's not that I won't schedule a call with you. It's that I have a very specific set of hours that I will schedule calls and be on video and, have that planned. And then after that, it's flexible. And you have to understand that's my boundary is that I want to spend the afternoon with my kid. And do I work at 8 p.m. after he goes to bed to finish up whatever I couldn't get done? Absolutely, I do. And I'm willing to shift those hours to be able to spend that time.
And something you said that was really important when it comes to boundaries. So we said a boundary is a line that you do not cross, but it's also important that people can see that line. So you said, I make everybody aware that within these time boundaries, I am not available. And so they respect that. I see frequently people who maybe get frustrated with people encroaching on a boundary that they've set, but not communicated clearly to others. And, I think that's something that people need to be comfortable doing if you do have a boundary, making everybody aware of that boundary and, maybe even having to remind people at times because it's hard to remember all of the boundaries and all of the people and all of the places. So I think it's also reasonable to have to remind people at times about some of those boundaries.
With time boundaries, what is the easiest way to remind people?
Oh, there's this newfangled thing called a calendar.
Oh my God, what? Tell me about this.
Even recurring appointments, really wild concept.
So you can block out time so that if someone's scheduling a meeting, you're unavailable. Mind blown.
Yeah. But that is one of the ones that countless times I have seen the interactions where somebody says, don't you know I'm not available at that time? Well, no, your calendar was free. So I booked a meeting during that time. There are places and opportunities for you to set those things. Out of office messages is another really great. I mean, Donny, I think, has some of the most detailed out of office messages because he does travel frequently. So he sets expectations so that I get that response and I know what he is doing and when I can expect to hear something from them. And he's basically painting those boundaries for me so that I know what to expect. Really helpful stuff. and another newfangled technology, the out of office auto response.
Yeah, and I
Amazing.
use the calendar one too. So one of the boundaries that I draw is Tuesday afternoons for me are focus time, and Friday all day focus time, meeting no meetings. So those I have blocked out so that my team knows don't schedule something. They also know that if they really need to, they can ask, but ask before you schedule. Otherwise, you'll get an automatic refusal.
hmm So I have calendar control issues, which stem from being extremely ADHD and having time management issues. And so I have gone from having zero skills in time management as a child and no perception of time to having extremely detailed boundaries and organization around time management that if you violate, I struggle to exist in this world and interact on a functional basis. So I know that that is my own thing. I understand that these are triggers and boundaries for me that other people may not understand. They may not understand the function of it. They may not understand why. And so I'm super upfront with communicating, which is I don't have a Calendly link because it gives me too much anxiety. If somebody throws something on my calendar and it's in the middle of maybe a time block where I was planning to do something else, then my brain doesn't work right and I sit in waiting mode for 2 hours and then I lose the whole functionality of the day for myself and I just blow up internally. And other people don't get that. They don't understand. It's like, oh, it's just a 15-minute check-in. Well, yeah, to you, it's just a 15-minute check-in. For me, I have to be at a specific place, ensure I'm not late, make sure that I'm there for the whole thing and I'm present and I'm prepared. And there's all these other things around it that give me issues as a human. And so I know that about myself. So I have a boundary where all scheduling goes through me or it goes through my assistant who also knows my boundaries, which also means if you want to have a pickup one-on-one call with me, you need to message me and ask if it's okay, right? And if you just call me, probably not going to answer, to be honest. Like you need to message first and make sure that I'm available and ready and in a place where I can have this conversation, or we're going to schedule in probably a day and a half. Because if I'm just scheduling for tomorrow all the time, then I'm still not getting my work done, right? And so that's a time management boundary that I have, but I'm very communicative about what that looks like. And I'm also very good at making sure that everything gets scheduled within the boundaries of my week. And I'm not pushing people out 3, 4, 5 weeks. It's one day. So generally speaking, I say, if you need to talk to me immediately, it's a fire, it's an emergency, I will make the time, but I will make the time on my time, not on your time. And the secondary piece of it is if it's something that's not urgent, there's no fire, you just want to chat, it's probably going to be over 24 hours before we have that conversation. Because for me to functionally plan my days, I need a whole day in advance to like get used to what my calendar is going to look like for the next day.
Well, and I think, all of those things are, it's important for people to be respectful of those things, but it's your responsibility to manage, right? And I think that's
100%.
one of the challenges that people run into, especially early in their career, because they don't know how to navigate like managing and communicating those boundaries. So they get frustrated that people aren't respecting their boundaries, but they're actually not goalkeeping whatsoever. They're actually just like letting the balls come flying at them and they're just flying by and they keep, scrambling and doing the things without ever managing those boundaries for themselves. So, what are some ways that like maybe we can help equip people with how to help set boundaries when they don't really know how to manage them?
So I think the first step is self-awareness, right? Understanding what is the boundary and why do you have it? Like time boundaries are a little bit easier to manage because you have calendars. You can communicate expectations there. I know you can set Calendlys to have all sorts of rules around it. It still doesn't work for me, but it works for most people, right? And you can do that. There are other boundaries though, right? Like if you have boundaries around the type of work that you're going to do or not do. And I know this comes up a lot, particularly on my team, where we have somebody delegating something that might not be appropriate for the level they're delegating it
Right.
to. And their expectation is that it will be a finished product, right? So it is okay to delegate a project that is above that person's level with their understanding, with making sure they have the upfront support, with knowing you're going to have to review and revise as a way to train and develop people. It is not okay to dump your whole week of work on somebody on a lower level because you either don't feel like doing it or something more fun came up or whatever, and expect them to produce a finished product, right? And so there's ways to say as a, somebody receiving that, hey, I don't think this is the appropriate thing for me to do, and this is why. If you want me to do this project, I'm happy to help with it. There's no way I can do this and my whole job this week. So maybe we can have a deadline in 2 weeks, and I'm going to need a meeting upfront, in the middle, and at the end, and expect to have to review it because I've never done this before, right? That is a really easy conversation when you do it upfront. If you just say, yes, of course I'll do it, and then you jump into it and go, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And this is really anxiety inducing. I'm going to work all night. I'm going to try and get it done. I'm going to do everything I can to like make this manager or director or partner happy with whatever I'm doing. That's really bad and a violation of very specific boundaries that should be in place in the organization. But it is not you saying, no, I don't feel like doing my job today, which I have had people say, which is, this is the right level of work. It is communicated up front. You know the deadlines of this, and you are saying, oh, well, for me, it is taking me too long, so I'm just not going to do it. Well, then you need to self-reflect and think about efficiency.
Right. And that's right. So you can't lean on quote unquote boundaries to not accept the work or the things that are within your domain to be capable of handling. But in those other scenarios, and I think this is a theme that we have probably across so many podcast episodes that we've done, but good communication seems to be the bedrock of a lot of this, and especially proactive communication when it comes to, maybe somebody giving you things that are outside of those boundaries. And you brought up a really good example that I've also seen in my prior roles where you assign people a project and then they delegate it to other people. And as a manager or supervisor, maybe you didn't make it clear, like, don't delegate this to other people. This is your responsibility to get this done. And I've seen that so many times in organizations where people will just delegate their jobs to other people. And, they're usually, if I'm giving you something, it's because I want you to complete it. And if it could be delegated, maybe I'll tell you, if you can find somebody else to do it, then, that's an okay thing to cross, but it all comes back to good communication.
Right, because like you said on that one, I will normally say I'll either say, Byron, can you do this? Or I'll say, Byron, can you find someone to do this? Or can you or your team get this done? There's a difference in the way that we would actually communicate that delegation.
Sure.
Another thing that I think is important to raise during this point is that you shouldn't assume that your boundaries are everyone else's boundaries, because I find that a lot where they're like, well, I don't like this, so I assume you don't like this, or and I'm like, that's not necessarily always valid.
Yeah, that's a really great example. People tend to project their preferences, boundaries, or assumptions on others.
Yeah. And, I think there's a lot of like TikTok and Reels and people talking about like, oh, you need to set better boundaries at work, and like hard boundaries are important and all this stuff. And so you have a lot of people like coming into work and being like, no, no, no. Like you can't just say no to doing your job, right? Like there's basic expectations. A company also has boundaries of what is acceptable for you to perform in that role that you have been hired and you are being compensated for. And understanding that is really important. And if you don't understand it, or you feel like they're very blurry boundaries or it's unclear, ask for clarification. Don't just say no, right? And you have a choice, right? So if you're in a role, if you're in a job and you don't like the boundaries of the role you're in, you can say, this is not the role for me. I am going to go find another one. Or you can ask for a modification and say, hey, this is too much. I would like to do this half of the job. Is there a role for me doing just that or not, right? But the other side of it is finding there's all these people coming in being like, well, you know, I'm watching all these TikToks. All these people are saying, like, I'm not getting paid for that. I'm not getting paid for that. And at the end of the day, like, you need to understand what you're actually getting paid for before you just start saying no and not doing things at your job. Because if it is unclear, you could lose your job over that pretty easily. And it's very unhealthy to expect that you get to determine everything about your role, where you work, when you work, what you work on. That is generally speaking, you have to go open your own company to do that. You can't just accept a job and then be like, I'm only going to cherry pick these pieces of it, right? That's not a boundary. In
Well,
fact,
with all of us being founders on this, I do think we got to address that though, because a lot of people think, well, I'm just gonna start my own company, we can do it. And I actually probably feel, yes, I do have more control, but there's quite a bit of where I need to adjust to everybody else because I'm like, well, for them to get their job done, I need to make sure I can do this for them. Or for example, I need to make myself available during these times because whether it's because a client needs something particular or a staff member, that's when it'll fit in their schedule. Like, I feel like we're responding a lot to that as well. So it's not like you just become your own boss and you can do anything, whatever you want, willy-nilly. Unless you totally stay a sole proprietor, maybe then you might be able to do that.
well, and that's, you may or may not make money. And those are the
And
choices that you're making.
And you may or may not have customers, right? I mean, because even as a sole proprietor, if you have people paying you, they to a certain degree are who you were working for. So these are all important things. And I think that's also, why the core of the boundary conversation is so important because it exists at all levels in all different places. And depending on your role and responsibilities may depend on how much you have to sacrifice in certain moments when it comes to certain boundaries. I mean, as a business owner, there are some times when you have to do shit you don't want to do. And you're just like, that is the way it goes. And you're just going to have to pick and choose those times when you have to maybe pick up the boundary and just go get it done because there's nobody else to do it.
Yes, that happens all the time. And I think, the other side of this is understanding who you are, what you are good at, how you need to function in a workplace, as well as personally, and what sets you up for success goes a long way to determining what your boundaries are and what your triggers are as well. Because generally speaking, triggers come from boundary violations. So if you find yourself getting upset at work all the time, it is probably because your personal boundaries are being violated. Now, if you don't know what those personal boundaries are, you can't communicate them. And if you don't communicate them up front, you can't expect anybody else to respect them, right? So all of this comes back to self-awareness and figuring out where are these things coming from and how do I work through it in a productive and professional way? And is this the right role for me? Is this aligned with what I need long term and what I need in the moment? And am I going to work with people that can respect how I function in this world? And you're right, you can't just pick and choose everything if you start your own company, but it is a whole lot easier and the ramifications are on you versus somebody else, right? So it's helpful. But I can say, just coming into work and being like, I'm not doing that's not a boundary setting. That's just being obstinate. And I don't think anybody wants team members that are obstinate and just pissed off for no reason because they've been spiraling too much on social media, which unfortunately does happen. Now, if you don't know your boundaries and you don't communicate them effectively and they are constantly violated, what happens?
Probably burnout is
Burnout.
probably, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Nailed it. You get burnt out and everything becomes a trigger and nothing is satisfying or productive in a positive light. And it is very difficult to get through that. I think about burnout as it's basically professional depression. It's hard to get out of bed. You're not motivated by anything. It's like very, very difficult to focus, and everybody pisses you off because they just breathe and you're like, why are you breathing near me? I don't need this, right? And it's just not productive. And there's very easy ways to get out of burnout. And a lot of it goes back to self-reflection and understanding who you are and how you function in the world. So what are some ways you guys do that? Like, how do you figure out and determine your boundaries?
I just have very few boundaries, so it's very easy.
I doubt that's true. Maybe we need to do some work on this, Byron. We can have a one-on-one.
And I was like, there's a reason why you work from home and are not being forced to go into the office. But that's also another one. I think it's important because I think a lot of people also, they're like, oh, well, I want to do this remote work. I want to work from home. Our firm's an all virtual firm. We found that people that are not able to draw good boundaries, part of which might be the distractions at home, also tend to fail in our organization because they end up either mixing stuff up, they're not able to focus, or everything becomes work because they're responding to their phone or their laptop and they hear the ding and they're like, oh, I gotta do something, versus we're not expecting a response. You need to set your work times, kind of as we said earlier, and you respond within your work times as long as you've communicated it. So which is going to lead towards, like you said, Liz, the burnout. We've seen that several times as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Donnie. I hadn't thought about it, but for the work from home scenario, you do have to know how to draw those boundaries because it extends into even boundaries in our personal life as far as where you no longer have a commute, so your computer is always there, and making time to not get on email or jump onto Slack real quick and do some things just because it's right there and available to you. So I can certainly see that, but I am curious though, Liz. I feel like the boundaries that I have like just kind of organically evolved over my very long career at this point. And I can't imagine sitting down and doing an exercise and saying like, what are my boundaries? I don't think I've ever done that.
Interesting. You should. And so, a couple things, right? Like, and this isn't true in personal interactions and everything in life, right? If you find yourself triggered, you find yourself angry, frustrated, anxiety ridden, like any of the like big negative emotions that have negative outcomes in life, you can self-reflect and say, what caused that trigger, right? And so this is a very reactive way to set boundaries. This is somebody violating a boundary, and then you realizing, oh, that's actually a boundary to me. Like that's something that is upsetting. Now, why is it upsetting? Is it because I have other stuff going on in my life? Is it because I'm burnt out? Is it because I'm anxious or depressed? Or is this actually a core to who I am? And this is something that is not comfortable, right? Here's a great example. I worked for a firm, large firm. They were doing something I felt was unethical in general. Every single day showing up at that office and working with them, somebody would mention that project and I would automatically be triggered and I'd be angry and pissed off and reactive the rest of the day about everything because I felt that the core of that project was unethical. And it only took me like 2 weeks, to be fair, to figure out that that's why I was angry at work every day was because of this project. And so I brought it up to my supervisor and I said, hey, I don't think this is ethical. This is why. Here's where I think it violates boundaries of, ethics. And they disagreed with me for whatever reasons and presented their case back and said, you will continue to work on this project. And I said, cool, I'm going to go find another job because there is no reconciliation of that, right? If you have an ethical boundary violation and there is no justification, there's not information that you're missing, like you have the whole picture and you still believe it's unethical, there will not be a resolve and you will just show up pissed off every day, right? And so I did. I went and I found another job and moved on, and that was the right decision for me. And luckily for me, I self-reflected very quickly about that. Other people don't, right? And so, I think a sense of self, a sense of understanding where you like what you believe in this world, what is ethical, grounding yourself and developing those skill sets intentionally is really important to setting good boundaries and recognizing when negative feelings are because of real boundary triggers versus other stuff going on, right? And as you guys know, and as I've mentioned many times, I'm extremely ADHD, which also comes with sensory issues, right? So if you put me in a really loud restaurant and try to have a difficult conversation with me, I will be triggered, not because of the difficult conversation, it won't go well, but I will be triggered because I'm listening to the 25 conversations around me, and all I hear is somebody like banging on the table and like banging cups and drinking and like the scratch of knives, and I cannot for the life of me focus on you and the conversation you're trying to have with me and the words that are coming out of your mouth, and I'm triggered by all this external stimuli, not this conversation still isn't going to go well. I'm going to be a dick because I am so overstimulated in that environment that I can't do it. So if you want to have a difficult conversation with me, I know it has to be in a quiet environment, right? Or one-on-one on a call, not on a Zoom with like a million people with other things happening and pictures and, whatever. So I bring that up to say I've spent a lot of time understanding myself and thinking about it and saying, okay, so, some of it's self-reflection from triggering events, which is reactive, and some of it is proactive, saying, what do I want? Like when I wake up in the morning, like, what do I want for today? What brings me joy? What do I enjoy working on? Like, what triggers my curiosity in this world, right? And how do I ensure that I build a life around that? And intentionally knowing these other things about yourself, which only comes from self-reflection and from, purposeful exercises around it.
That's really great advice. And when I first started well, maybe not when I very first started, but maybe 3 or 4 years into when I started my firm, I used to have everyone do an exercise about their personal mission statement. And actually, I had Byron do it when Byron was kind of searching a little bit. This is maybe 5 years ago or so, I think.
Yeah,
I
somewhere
sent
around
it
there.
to Byron and I was like, hey, go do this exercise because I have my team do it and usually it helps them. So I think that is really important to figure out kind of what's your purpose in life? What are your strengths? What do you think? What do you want to try and achieve? And then using that also to kind of set perhaps not the boundaries that keep things in, but also boundaries that's like, okay, I'm not going to do this because that doesn't align, and I'm not going to do that because that doesn't align. So keeping within those boundaries sometimes also can be from a positive, more focused, right? Let me stay on track to what I'm trying to do. And in fact, that's what I'm doing a lot with my teams now is figure out your focus because we're all over the place and we got to start drawing some boundaries